What a video. All the hospital workers working as hard as they can to save lives, risking their own life in this COVID-19 epidemic. What a sacrifice they're making. And I'm also drawn to Black Lives Matter for all the people that are participating in the various gatherings and protests and marches. They also are in jeopardy of getting the COVID-19, but they're there because God has called them to be there. They are protected and surrounded by God's love and God's understanding and God's acceptance. And someone asked me, how do you know about God's love? So I want to go into a story, my life. I'm choosing not to write it down and read it because then I'd be looking down the whole time. I want this to come from my heart as I share it with you. It's personal and it's emotional. So bear with me as I walk through this. How do I know God's love is with us? How do I know God is with us? For me, it all started in about 1945. I was about 3 years old when I had a near-death experience, an out-of-body experience when I fell down a flight of steps. And I can still remember in vivid detail what my mother was wearing. And somehow that kicked the door open, and I have been spiritually looking ever since, trying to find a personal relationship with God. And that struggle has gone on all these years, and I have found that personal relationship, and it continues to grow through various examples in my life. That first experience left me looking, journeying, hoping, wanting, yearning. Then I had that first stillbirth experience at the hospital. What an experience that was for me. It rekindled in me the sorrow that I had for the loss of the child that my first wife and I had at 6 months that I never really grieved for. And my grief was heavy and hard and long. And I thought the distance between life and death is but yet a single breath. A single breath. My goodness. And as I held that baby as they baptized it, I knew God was there. And I was holding one of God's littlest angels. After that experience, I came to church on Sunday and they sang the song that we will sing in a few minutes. Here I am, Lord. And as I heard that song and the words, here I am, Lord, is it I, Lord? I have heard you calling in the night. I will go, Lord, if you lead me. I will hold your people in my heart. And that started my 33-year career as a chaplain in the hospital. Being called in at night to be with people that are struggling, people that are dying, people that just want a prayer or a presence. And what a gift that has been. And over again, when I enter a room, I can feel God's presence. I can feel the angels surrounding the patients. And it is an experience that is none other. Then I have to look down at my notes, 2005, our house burned to the ground. To stand outside and watch your house be totally engulfed in fire is an experience that I hope no one else has to go through. But what helped me through that was all the KC people that came running to be with us. They couldn't drive down the driveway because it was clogged with fire engines and fire trucks. So they came running through the woods and came running toward us, being with us, holding us, surrounding us. And as the night went on and on, they were there for us. And God was there. In the days after the fire, every day I would go out and sit with the remains of the house, if you want. And I'd sit at a picnic table that I had set up in the back. And every day I would find some presence of God. I finally had the courage to get a ladder and crawl up into one small space that was still left standing, which was my office, walk through or crawl through the hole they had thrown my safe through or my file cabinet through out into the yard and papers all over. And I was trying to find my Bible And I worked through all the rubble and sorting through, and I reached into this great big pile of ashes, and I pulled up one file, the only thing that survived, which was the outline for our kitchen we had remodeled some years earlier. And that's how they were able to reconstruct our house in the dimensions of various rooms based on that. What a gift that God would save that and give it to me. That house, every day I was there, something happened. A piece of scripture would float by, and I can remember clearly it said, I am with you always. And then a picture that was all charred and smoked, and I broke the glass out, and it was the Irish blessing. And then I had a picture of the wall where there was a cross that survived to the very end, and it finally fell down, and the whole wall was black except the outline of the cross, which was all white. And I had a picture of our bedroom that I shared with Casey one day, and I was sharing, and our granddaughter, who was young at the time, came up to me and said, "Let me see the picture, Pop-Pop." I said, no, I can't let you see that picture. That's too much. No, I've got to see it. I've got to see it. So I finally showed it to her, and she said, "You missed it, Pop-Pop." And I said, "I missed what?" And she said, "Look at the picture. Look at the center." And in the center, as clear as anything, was a copy of our wedding invitation, which said, "The way is clear. Let us begin anew." And that night, I remember when we were with the Millers who took us in for the night, I was laying in bed and Carol was asleep, and I was just staring out in the wilderness because I was really devastated by the fire. And it looked like a black window just closed. And I said, "God, please don't leave me now, not now." And then off to the side, it was like a window opened and there was this beautiful meadow. And I thought, that's our new life. It's going to be coming soon. And as I sat out next to that rebel day after day, one of the contractors would come up and sit next to me and share with me that his wife had brain cancer and how he was going to deal with it. And I listened and we prayed together. And another day, the son came up to me who was also working with his father and wanted to know about his mother, and we listened, and then I prayed with him. And another day it was the plumber, and another day it was the carpenter, and another day it was the foreman, and another day it was the trash collector who came to empty the dumpster, who came up and sat next to me and talked about how his son had been scalded by some water on the stove. And we listened, and then I said a prayer with him. And day after day after day, God's presence was there, and I knew it. For 19 months, I sat day after day. They assured me that they would be able to find the cause, and I dreaded that. And that the insurance man who was doing the investigation along with everybody else came to me and said, "I will find it." Then 3 days later, he came and said, "I cannot figure this one out. I'm sorry, sir." And my son said, he is delighted because he didn't want to know the cause of the fire, because that way he doesn't blame himself or he doesn't blame others. And that was a gift, a beautiful, beautiful gift. And the gifts just kept coming. The man who came out to do the estimate from the insurance company, and I knew that was always a big charge because the insurance company bids low and your contractor bids high, and then you negotiate through the bank and the insurance company, and it's back and forth. And the guy sat there and started the investigation and the reappraisal. And he looked at me and said, "I know you." And I said, "How do you know me?" "You visited my father in the hospital. You're a chaplain. Thank you for that visit." And I looked at him, and God's voice was with me, and I said, "When you estimate the rebuilding of this house, estimate it to build it." He said, "What do you mean?" I said, "Your company is going to build it. I don't need another estimate. I'm going to go with your estimate." And the insurance company called me and said, "Are you sure?" I said, "I'm absolutely positive." And the foreman said, "I'm not going to tell you my name, just my first name, Joe." He said, "Because I don't want to put you off." So after a few days, and we became friends, and his last name was Crook. He was not a crook. He was one of the most gentle men I know, and he rebuilt that house with us step by step. And it was a delight to work with him. And that was my experience with the house fire. And I came to thank God for that fire. Thank God that I learned more about God. I learned more about me. I learned more about our relationship together. And the rock that supports me is my wife by my side the whole way. What a gift. And then the next experience was in 2009. I had had a single floor pole barn built, and it had been raining for days and days. And after they were finished, there was water running through the floor because it hadn't been cemented yet. So I got down there in my mid-sized tractor with the front end loader and was moving dirt around to block the water from going through. And I hit a berm that I didn't see, and the tractor started to go over. And I heard, as loud as I've ever heard, jump. And I have been on many tractors for many years, and I've never jumped off a tractor, but that one I jumped off. And later I could see if I hadn't, I'd have broken my neck on a tree. But when I went to get up, I couldn't because the tractor had pinned me to the ground. My first realization was I was going to die. My next realization was I couldn't breathe. I couldn't breathe because the tractor was indeed on me. And I lasted, and I kept breathing and kept thinking of all my loved ones. And I asked God, and suddenly I saw this beautiful meadow off to the side, and people were running around having a great time. And I thought, oh, and later I found out that that's an image of heaven that many people have going through these experiences. And finally, I got to the point where I couldn't breathe anymore. And I said to God, I give you my spirit. And with that, I laid my head down, and I believe I died. And I heard, look for the light. And I saw this beautiful tube. I'd always read about a tunnel, but not a tube. And later I saw a picture of that tube painted in the 1400s. But I entered that tunnel or that tube, and the beautiful light at the end, and I've never felt such love and peace and joy and understanding. And it was like 1,000 pounds had been lifted off my back in just a pure joy. And God said to me, 2 questions. Did you love and did you accept love? And I saw my parents who had the child between them, the one that my first wife and I had lost at 6 months pregnancy. And that was such a gift to be able to see that child. I had not seen her before, although I've always carried her in my heart. And then I heard this incredible, beautiful voice of Carol with all the angels calling me forth, come back for dinner. And the angels must have been with her because she got confused and couldn't remember how to get off the deck to get down to see what was going on, because she heard me, and it was only a whisper, but she heard me ask for help. And she came down and said, where are you? And found me. And from there, it was 9/11 and the ambulances. And I was standing outside the barn watching the ambulance negotiate around, and I was yelling at them to hurry up. I was over on the other side of the barn. And when they pulled me out, they were amazed because they thought I'd be dead, and I wasn't. And I heard the medic say, my God, look at his back. And from there, on a stretcher to an ambulance to take me to the helicopter for shock trauma. And there was 2 hands on either side of my face holding my face. And I thought, they can't be human hands. They're so gentle and they're not moving and rocking as the stretcher is. And they flew me to shock trauma, and all of a sudden I'm in shock trauma and everybody's yelling at me, and I'm pleading, please give me something so I can breathe. I can't breathe. I can't breathe. And finally the doctor comes in and says, sir, we can't find anything wrong with you. But we know you've had trauma and we can see it in your blood chemistry, so we're going to have to keep you overnight. And they put me in a special room because I'm a chaplain and I work for Hopkins, and they take care of their own. And they gave me a nurse for the night, and the nurse's name was Faith, and her twin sister's name was Hope. And she sat with me the entire night. And the next day, I walked from the hospital to my car, shaken and rattled, but renewed with God's love and understanding from being in that tunnel. And that was in 2005. Then that was in 2009, excuse me. 2005 was the fire. That was in 2009. And then in 2015, I was sitting at the office and I said to our administrative assistant, Susan, I have a little pressure on my chest. And she looked at me and said, if you don't go to a doctor right now, I'm calling a code on you. And I promised her I would go. So I got home and Carol said, go. So I went to patient first, and this doctor looked at me and did the EKG and said, EKG is fine, sir, but I know that some men are having a heart attack and they don't show. on EKG. So I'm sending you to the hospital in an ambulance, which they did overnight there. And then by sirens and flashing lights, they rushed me down to Hopkins the next morning and put me immediately into the cath lab. And 5 hours later, they came out. And 2 of my stents had already failed, and the third one in the same artery they thought was working, but it had failed within hours. And I laid there in 2 weeks in such pain because I got a gallbladder infection, a urinary infection, and I went into a seizure, and I had shock. I had sepsis that took over, and my temperature spiked, and I was just screaming, "Let me die, let me die, let me die." And I was saying, "Where to God? Where, God, where? Where's the tunnel? I'm ready to go." And God said very clearly, I didn't say the tunnel would be there. I said that I would be with you. I have been with you. I'm with you now, and I always will be with you. My love and my light surround you. And later that night, a doctor came in late at night. It was dark. The room was dark, and said, "Sir, we're sorry, but there's nothing else we can do." And then he left. And a nurse sitting there said, "Wait a minute, sir, I will be back in a few minutes." And she woke up the whole medical team, and they all came in and sat down and talked to me. And one doctor, PhD, wonderful young woman, said to me, "Sir, what did you hear?" And it was like I was back in the light of that tunnel in the near-death experience. And I talked about a new life that I had to leave and a new understanding and on and on. And I left that hospital in 2 weeks after the ICU and came home with IVs and central lines and sat there staring at the wall, wondering, what did that mean? I am with you. I always have been with you. I'm with you now, and I always will be with you. And it took me days and days just trying to contemplate that. And I finally took that experience from here and put it in my heart here. And I know without a doubt that God walks with me and talks with me and is with me every day, every moment, every second, as God is with you every day, every moment, every second. So thank you for asking me to share this story, because it is a story that is very dear and very, very personal to me. So I go back to those words. Here I am, Lord, is that I, Lord, I have heard you calling in the night. I will go, Lord, if you lead me. I will hold your people in my heart, and I am held in God's heart as you are held in God's heart. As you go about listening and in the hospital, watching the staff trying to save lives, or when you go to the marches and gathering for Black Lives Matter, God is with you, marching with you, marches with you every single day. And I thank God every day for this precious gift of life, because every day is a gift. So I thank you. Amen.